At 2:14 in the morning, a radar operator in Bahrain watches a dot appear on his scope, then another, then a third, then 6 more. By the time he finishes counting, Iran has already launched the largest coordinated missile and drone barrage ever fired at American military forces. Hundreds of projectiles, multiple countries, every major US base in the Middle East targeted simultaneously. What happened next rewrote every textbook on missile defense ever written. This is the story of the night America's shield held, and the very real cracks Iran found in it. To understand what Iran was trying to accomplish, you need to understand what was at stake. These weren't random strikes, they were a coordinated attempt to degrade the military infrastructure the US was using to run its air campaign against Iran. Hit the early warning radars, drain the interceptor stockpiles, crater the runways, cut the communications, force the Americans to stop flying sorties long enough for Iran to breathe. The targets were precise. Naval Support Activity Bahrain, home to 8,000 American soldiers and their families. Al Udeid in Qatar, the beating heart of the Combined Air Operations Center that directs the entire air war. Al Dhafra in the UAE, Ali Al Salem in Kuwait, Muwafaq, Salti Air Base in Jordan. American compounds in Erbil, Iraq, some as close as 60 miles from Iranian-backed militia launch sites, and Carrier Strike Group 3, steaming in the northern Arabian Sea. Iran didn't want to inconvenience America. Iran wanted to knock it out. It didn't work, but understanding why it didn't work, and exactly where Iran came closest to succeeding, is one of the most important military lessons of the 21st century. At 2:14 in the morning, a radar operator in Bahrain watches a dot appear on his scope, then another, then a third, then 6 more. By the time he finishes counting, Iran has already launched the largest coordinated missile and drone barrage ever fired at American military forces. Hundreds of projectiles, multiple countries, every major US base in the Middle East targeted simultaneously. What happened next rewrote every textbook on missile defense ever written. This is the story of the night America's shield held, and the very real cracks Iran found in it. Before we go base by base, you need to understand the architecture that made any of this possible, because what America deployed across the Middle East that night wasn't a single missile defense system. It was a layered kill web, a bubble stack 6 deep, designed so that if one layer fails, the next one is already waiting. Think of it as a series of concentric rings around every base and every ship, each one covering a different altitude band, a different phase of an inbound missile's flight. It starts at the top. Before any interceptor fires, somebody has to see the threat. The E-3 Sentry AWACS, Airborne Warning and Control System, orbits at 30,000 feet, and its radar can see a missile launch while the missile is still accelerating out of Iranian territory. It doesn't just detect the threat, it passes targeting data in real time across the entire network via Link 16. A high-speed encrypted data link that lets every radar, every ship, every battery, see the same picture at the same time. In missile defense, information is as lethal as the interceptor itself. The AWACS is what makes the whole system smarter than the sum of its parts. Out at sea, the Aegis combat system is the outermost interceptor ring. The SPY-1D phased array radar has no moving parts, 4 fixed arrays per ship, each one scanning a quarter of the sky simultaneously. It builds firing solutions on threats that are still climbing out of Iranian airspace. The missiles haven't even reached their highest point yet, and Aegis already knows where they're going to land. The SM-3 interceptor is its long arm, a 3-stage rocket that sheds its boosters on the way up, and releases a kinetic warhead the size of a basketball into the vacuum above the atmosphere. No explosive. Just guided mass meeting guided mass at a closing speed that would cross the continental United States in under 12 minutes. Descending back into the atmosphere, the next layer waiting is THAAD, Terminal High Altitude Area Defense. 30 years of development, billions of taxpayer dollars, and a track record that includes defending the UAE against Houthi ballistic missiles in 2022 and firing roughly 150 interceptors in defense of Israel across 2024 and 2025. THAAD operates in the upper stratosphere, high enough to intercept a warhead before it has built up its full terminal velocity, which is the worst possible moment to try to stop something coming at you. Deeper in the atmosphere, the Patriot PAC-3 MSE handles the terminal phase, the final seconds of a warhead's descent. It is, in the simplest terms, a 17-foot guided telephone pole that accelerates to Mach 5 in 2 seconds and steers itself into the target nose-on. No fragmentation warhead. Just 700 pounds of kinetic energy turning an incoming warhead into debris over your airspace rather than a crater in your base. and at the very bottom of the stack, for anything that gets through everything else, you have point defense, the CIWS, CIWS, and RAM missiles. Last resort, ultra-short range. The CIWS is a 20mm Gatling gun that spins up to 4,500 rounds per minute and can reduce a drone to scrap metal in 4 seconds. Not elegant, brutally effective. That is the bubble. Now let's watch it get tested. If you want more data-driven breakdowns of modern weapon systems and kill chains, hit subscribe. We publish these deep dives every week and you will not want to miss what's coming next. Let's walk through exactly what happens in the 90 seconds between a ballistic missile leaving Iranian airspace and ceasing to exist over Qatar. The AWACS picks up the heat bloom from the rocket motor at launch. Before the missile has climbed to 10,000 feet, its speed and trajectory have already been computed and pushed via Link 16 to every radar and firing battery in the network. They don't have to find it. The data arrives before the threat does. A PAC-3 MSE operator at Al Udeid gets the track at 40 miles. Speed, trajectory, probable impact point, all computed in under 2 seconds. He confirms the engagement. The canister blows. The PAC-3 MSE clears the launcher. Same basic physics as its predecessor but faster, more maneuverable, with altitude thrusters borrowed from NASA spacecraft docking systems. It fires millimeter corrections at closing speeds where both objects cease to exist on contact. The seeker is hunting a specific heat signature, a specific radar cross-section, amid the clutter of an atmosphere that is also full of debris, decoys, and electronic noise. The first intercept flashes above Doha at 80,000 feet, over 8,000 miles per hour of combined closure speed, converting both missile and interceptor into a spray of particles that will drift through the upper atmosphere for days. A second PAC-3 is already climbing. For 90 seconds over Qatar, every Iranian missile meets an American interceptor on the way up. The operators cycle through engagements with the mechanical rhythm of a crew that has run this drill 1,000 times in simulators. But Iran isn't stupid, and they found a crack. The one success at Al Udeid came from a maneuvering warhead, a weapon that fired small lateral thrusters at 30,000 feet, shifted trajectory mid-descent, and slid past interceptors already committed to the original track. An ANFPS-132 early warning radar took damage. A section of the flight line got cratered, and it didn't even matter. The E-3 AWACS orbiting overhead was already doing the same job the ground radar was doing. The crater got rapid-set concrete within the hour. Officers inside the CAOC continued directing the air campaign against Iran without interruption. Iran put 3 weapons through the front door of the building running the air war against it. The air war didn't notice. Here's the part nobody puts in the press release. 380 intercepts over Kuwait. Perfect record. 0 leakers. The most complete missile defense performance in modern warfare history. But 380 intercepts means 380 interceptors gone, and that math is brutal. A Shahed kamikaze drone costs Iran roughly $30,000 to build. The PAC-3 MSE interceptor used to kill it costs the United States $4 million a round. That is a 133-to-1 cost-exchange ratio, and it runs in Iran's favor. Every Shahed that forces a PAC-3 launch is Iran spending $30,000 to cost America $4 million. Scale that up to 2,000 drones, and you're looking at Iran spending $60 million to force the US to expend potentially $8 billion in interceptors. It gets worse at the high end. A single THAAD interceptor costs roughly $15 million. An SM-3 Block 2IA runs around $30 million. Reports indicate the U.S. expended roughly a quarter of its total THAAD interceptor stockpile during the intense phase of this conflict. A quarter. These are not systems that can be restocked over a weekend. THAAD interceptors take years to manufacture. The Lockheed Martin production line runs at a fixed rate. There is no surge capacity that makes up a 25% inventory drawdown in months. This is not a failure of the shield. The shield performed flawlessly. This is a structural vulnerability that Iran is watching very closely and learning from with every salvo. The question is not whether the US can stop 1,000 missiles tonight. The question is what happens on night 5, when the racks are running thin and another 1,000 are already on the launch pad. Iraq illustrated the other edge of this problem. At Erbil, bases were so close to militia launch sites that radar gave seconds of warning, not minutes. The The solution there wasn't Patriot, it was the Sea Whizz's 20mm answer to a $30,000 plastic drone. 25 rounds of tungsten, meeting a plastic airframe the way a fire hose meets a paper plate. Cheap answer to a cheap threat. That math actually works. The hard math is the expensive to expensive equation, and no one has fully solved it. Of every decision Iran made that night, the single biggest strategic error was targeting the one American asset that wasn't bolted to the ground. When the IRGC launched ballistic missiles at Carrier Strike Group 3 in the northern Arabian Sea, they weren't just picking a fight with a ship, they were picking a fight with a system that was purpose-built, over 40 years of Cold War doctrine, to kill exactly what Iran was throwing at it. The Lincoln heeled into a hard turn, 100,000 tons of warship, pivoting to present the smallest possible radar cross-section to the inbound tracks. The escorts spread out, Aegis cruisers and guided missile destroyers positioned so wide you couldn't see the edges of the formation from the Lincoln's bridge. The SPY-1D phased array radars were tracking every inbound threat before it cleared Iranian airspace. The SM-3s went first, exo-atmospheric intercepts, catching warheads in space before they even began their terminal dive. 2 bright flashes above the Arabian Sea, 2 tracks gone before they ever started falling. SM-2s handled the next wave. A pair of Shaheds hugging the water at 50 feet tried to sneak under the radar, got inside the outer ring before the Lincoln's RAM system picked them up. 2 RAM missiles, 3 seconds apart, 2 intercepts at wave-top height. The fireball was visible from the flight deck. Not a single Iranian weapon touched the carrier or any ship in the formation. And 15 minutes later, the catapults were cycling. Every combat aircraft on the roof, loaded to maximum gross weight, Super Hornets, Growlers, a Hawkeye riding high to quarterback the strike. 14 jets in 9 minutes, every pylon loaded, every jet headed east. Iran's best shot at the Lincoln bought them 15 minutes of empty flight deck. They paid for it with JDAMs falling on the very facilities that launched the missiles. So what does all of this actually mean? Iran's primary deterrent, the threat of missile saturation, ran directly into the most sophisticated integrated air defense network ever fielded in combat, and by the raw numbers, the network won decisively, 380 for 380 over Kuwait. Every weapon aimed at the UAE intercepted, the carriers unscratched, the CAOC running its air campaign without interruption, while Iranian warheads were still smoking in the crater outside. But Iran learned things too. They learned that maneuvering warheads with mid-course correction thrusters can slip past committed interceptors. They learned that mass saturation, multiple simultaneous salvos from multiple vectors, taxes reload cycles and creates brief windows. They learned that the cost exchange ratio in their favor is mathematically unsustainable for the US at scale, and that every interceptor the US fires is one it cannot replace in days. The shield held. That is undeniable. But the men who built it will tell you themselves, it was never designed to face this volume indefinitely. The real question isn't whether the US won the missile exchange. It clearly did. The real question is what Iran is drawing on its whiteboards right now, and whether the answer to mass, cheap maneuvering threats is more of the same expensive interceptors or something fundamentally different. Directed energy weapons, high-energy lasers that can kill a Shahed for the cost of a gallon of jet fuel, railguns, electronic attack systems that fry the guidance on an entire salvo at once. The next chapter of this story isn't being written in Tehran or Washington. It's being written in defense labs, on procurement spreadsheets, and in the lessons extracted from a single night over the Gulf when America's shield held, and everyone noticed exactly how hard it had to work to do it. To understand how this connects to the broader strategic picture, including how the US and Israel dismantled Iran's military infrastructure in a coordinated campaign, click the video on screen right now. That breakdown goes deep on the targeting doctrine, the sequencing, and what it means for Iran's ability to rebuild. I'll see you there.